We will now resume proceedings in Finance Committee. And before we do that, I will ask Minister Kirkconnell if he would please lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege of being together here today in Finance Committee. Father, we thank you for all the blessings that you have given these Cayman Islands, and we ask you to continue the blessings to our three precious islands, Father. Father, we ask you to be with our chairman today. Give him strength as we move forward. We ask you to be with each one of the members here in our deliberations, that we will consider and look at our role here, Father, to make the best decisions with the country's money. We ask you to lead us, guide us, and direct us. Forgive us where we failed you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. When we adjourned on Friday evening, we had only to complete the Ministry of Education, in particular, just to take the vote on the remaining appropriations. We had exhausted all the questions that were being asked, so now we'll just proceed to take the vote on the various appropriations. So we'll commence with that. So all those in favor of TP 30, local and overseas scholarships and bursaries for $10,762,690 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. TP 51, other educational assistance, $249,154 standing part of the schedule. Sorry, let me say that again. All those in favor of TP 51, other educational assistance, $249,154 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. All those in favor of TP 52, Young Nation Builder Scholarships, $600,000 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. All those in favor of TP 56, Employment Initiatives, $641,000 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I'm
Bush.
sorry, but I wasn't here, and I need to just to find out whether the director of the, well, I don't know exactly the post, but I know it's something to do with employment. Mr. Ebanks, has he resigned? Has he left the post?
Mr. Bush, in all fairness, we had concluded the questions, so therefore.
Yeah, I know that, Mr. Chairman, but you're just taking the vote, which means that I could question this. And I wasn't here, but and it's quite easy for her to say yes or no, and what she's doing about it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to draw out time because I've been quarreling this morning about time.
No, I don't. Having said to the minister on Friday evening that her ministry was over and her staff did not need to return, I would just ask the minister to just say briefly whatever she knows that with respect to the question that's asked.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. That, as you would recall, the acting chief officer did speak to that issue on Friday, and from what I recall of that conversation is that there is a plan in place to address the situation. I don't know exactly what the details will be, but in terms of who is going to be in that.
But no,
stead,
has he retired? I mean, resigned, or what? He has resigned then.
as far as I understand, he has put
Okay.
in his resignation.
That's all I'm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bush. Thank you, Minister Rivers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, sir. All those in favor of TP 61, sorry, it's 56. All those in favor of TP 56, Employment Initiatives, $641, sorry, let me do that over. All those in favor of TP 56, Employment Initiatives, $641,000 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. All those in favor of TP 61, Student Enrichment and Support Services, for $554,000 $850 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, say no. Other executive expenses, OE 11. All those in favor of OE 11, subscription to the Caribbean Examination Council, $13,455 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. All those in favor of OE 12, University of the West Indies membership levy, $161,000 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Equity investments, EI 12. All those in favor of EI 12, Ministry of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs, $5 million standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Thank you. That completes the appropriations for the Ministry of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs.
Mr. Chairman, before you close the Minister of Education complete, I'd like to, your indulgence, to move a motion, please, related to education.
Mr. Miller, proceed.
Mr. Chairman, since the government does not have the resources to finance and build the desperately needed 2 classrooms and staff room at the Aiden O'Moyle Primary School in Northside, I'm asking that this Finance Committee approve the government, and in particular the Ministry of Education, to allow the PTA for the Aiden O'Moyle Primary School to try and raise the money to complete this project in time for the new school year starting in September 2015.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, the motion being raised is not asking government to spend money. You're asking that the government, or this House actually, support the PTA. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? Mr.
Mr.
Eden?
Chair, I just have a question. I didn't know that this finance committee needed to give the PTA permission from any school to give them permission to raise funds to do anything. I'm not so sure.
Mr. Eden?
No, I just want to, and Mr. Chairman, I don't have any guarantees, but I have to do what I can to try and get these 2 classrooms.
Thank
so
you.
all I'm asking is that if we, as I understood, it has already been approved by planning. We've been working on this for 3 years. We've been promised funding every year. It doesn't happen. It is now before the building control unit. And I believe this committee says yes to the Aiden O'Moyle Primary School PTA attempting to raise the funds and do the project. When I call on the education department to give me construction drawings, they have to do it. Otherwise, they don't give them to me.
But Mr. Eden, you want to speak to the motion, sir?
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated to you earlier, I wanted to make a few remarks. Listening on the periphery of these hollow chambers, what I was going to say may have been overtaken. And just to set the stage, because of certain commitments, I did not make it to caucus yesterday. On leaving here Friday evening, Mr. Chairman, I did not feel so good about what was happening. It preyed on me all weekend. And I would ask that this Honorable Finance Committee consider. I've listened to the member from Northside for the last 2 or 3 years. He's begged, he's pleaded, he's cajoled, and probably if we had tried, he might even have switched parties. Just saying that in jest. I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that we as a government consider, as we go forward. These are young children being affected. I had the wonderful opportunity yesterday to go to the school leaving ceremony of the Savannah Primary School, a wonderful, beautiful thing. These children, as they come out of school, is a formative stage of their life, Mr. Chairman. And I cannot understand, having served 3 terms in cabinet, 23 years in this parliament, these are young kids we're dealing with that we can't find, what it is, over $300,000 to get a couple of classrooms built for Northside and whatever needs Northside and Bordentown. We have to prioritize, Mr. Chairman. This would take approximately $50,000 from each ministry, looking at 7 ministers and other departments. And I don't need to tell you, Mr. Chairman, it can be identified. I've seen in the past, and on occasions there's always some money that's not spent before the end of the financial year. All I'm doing, Mr. Chairman, is begging and pleading that my government look at how we can expedite the urgency that evidently is needed. We have heard the horror stories from the 2 members from the Eastern Districts with their schools. Let's put an end to it for whatever reason. Thank you, and may God bless us all.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Mr. Bush, sir?
Mr. Chairman, I want to agree with Mr. Eden on this, because we've sat and listened, and excuse after excuse is found. And in a budget that we have, and when we are, I say, bragging that we can have over $100 million surplus, that we can spend $17 million a year on prison, we must be confined $300,000 to allow Northside School to go ahead. And I know how the budgeting process goes, Mr. Chairman, and I see, because I see where you cut back on 5,000, 10,000. I don't know. I know it was because people had to meet a mark and to get what the government set out to do in their budget. But I think that we shouldn't waste time on this. And while you got that motion, I will amend that motion to say that we can, because that's all we can do, that we consider, because we, as backbenchers, we can't move the $300,000 ourselves or any rise in the cost, but we can ask that government consider it. And I don't think I need a second for it, but I would amend the motion to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. Kirkconnell?
Mr. Chairman, I think that what the Leader of the Opposition has just said and the member who proposes the motion meets with a lot of sympathy on this side. I think that they also recognize that we had constraints in the budget, and each minister was challenged to come in at a certain line item, a certain amount, and I believe that each minister did that. But from this side, from this government, we believe that the education of the children of this country is extremely important. And I'm happy, as the Deputy Premier, to give the commitment on behalf of this government that each minister will go back and look for funds that we can commit to the Minister of Education, that they can find the funds to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkconnell.
So is that you will consider, or that you are going definitely to do so?
We will commit
Okay.
to do this for the school in Northside.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkconnell. Mr. McLean, you have a...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm listening here, and I'm quite surprised that this was not known before now, that the government has now found it necessary to huddle to provide what is necessary to get the classrooms built in Northside. Mr. Chairman, I have submitted stuff for the school in East End as well. I mean, right now we don't need classrooms or hall because that was done under the previous government. The hall in particular and the reconfiguration of for the classrooms. But there are some other little things. Mr. Chairman, we are placed in a situation where ministers get hamstrung by one, the cost of these things that are being proposed by Public Works. And Mr. Chairman, I'm not going into the cost. I know you don't like that too much. And I agree with you. I've always supported that view, sir. So I'm not ridiculing you or anything. That's one. Two, we have forever talked about providing the resources necessary for our children. I hear the minister cry blood the last few weeks, last week sometime, about the lack of resources to set standards for our children, for our schools, as to what they should be. I hear you talk about it, Mr. Chairman. We need to set standards. But because we have other stuff that has priority, we see it in other districts. There are other districts that are progressing much better than from financial resources than the member from Northside and I, our constituencies. And if we don't talk about it publicly, nobody knows that we make these appeals. We go to cabinet consistently, and when the time comes for budget, it is not made available. Mr. Chairman, we're not doing this for ourselves. I don't have any child living in East End or going to the school. We may say Mr. Miller has two that is going to the school in Northside, but that's besides the point. It is the global. He probably has more than two going Northside. But Mr. Chairman, it is a global thing about our children. We have always talked about education. The minister when I did my speech here when we was sworn in here, I challenged the minister then, who was very new, fresh that day, to move ahead with the completion of John Gray High School. We have not moved on that. We're trying to get the hall done. What's the use of a hall without the other attendant facilities? You know, these are the things, Mr. Chairman, and I am not blaming anyone. I'm just saying we need to try and get our priorities right. Our schools are suffering. I asked them when the generator is going to be for East End. They gave the minister one nonsense story, long set of explanation as to why the schools don't have generators. I was expecting to come here this morning, and I was going to ask you that, sir, if it was ready, because they promised that they would produce for me, provide me with the schools that has generators and their capacities. I wonder when that's going to happen. Next year, that I ask it again? Mr. Chairman, this needs to be addressed and addressed pronto. We talk about the sports. They don't have, from the sports office, they don't attach coaches to our schools to assist with the coaching in the school. Only Eastern and North Side. Those are the two. What is the government trying to do? Is the government deliberately trying to make us look like we are not doing our jobs when we are? When we submit it to cabinet, and nobody looks at it. Very few people look at it. Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I never submit anything to you because you finance minister. You're not doing anything up there in East End except trying the global financial thing. So you don't become a subject of my submissions. But I do with everyone, and no one responds. What are we to do? Mr. Chairman, the member from Northside is in his right to do such things. When I was minister, everybody wrote into me. The one thing about it was,
I said on the floor of this honorable house, I didn't want the leader of the opposition and his 3 people from West Bay being here, but it was besides them, besides the fact that they're here, West Bayers had to be part of my priority as well. And we need to start thinking about the priorities in this country. And the people, the fact that I occupy this real estate doesn't change the fact that it will be occupied, whether it's with the government of the day or not. And it's unfair to the people of East End and North Side. And I don't know why. Is it because the two of us, Mr. Chairman, I want this government, and yeah, the government has just committed it. And I hear I'm committing to all them things that I asked the minister about for East End, and she says she doesn't have the resources to do it. She too is struggling. Maybe the government needs to recognize that we need to stop playing lip service to education in this country. Mr. Chairman, I heard you with it. Hear about your experiences at the school, sir. We need to deal with this, and we need to deal with it pronto. Forget about Arden and Ezard. We are nobodies.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the member from East End knows that he's batting on a good wicket, and he bats well when he's on that wicket. Mr. Chairman, but I have to say that while if I were in his position, I'd be doing the same thing. I understand that, and I don't have a problem with that. But, and I've done it, yes, I've done it. Forgive me. But the fact of the matter is, and I just want to make sure that we fully appreciate that, the fact of the matter is that we have a set figure of expenditure which we cannot exceed. There are other priorities, and of course, both members, North Side and East End, have other requests, and you try to satisfy them. And now, of course, this is the major priority, and if we had said at the beginning, we'll gladly do this, but this, and this won't get done, it would have been another story. There are many situations in our own districts, if we're talking about districts, which we have said as a government, we want to, but we can't because we don't have the resources this year to do it. So juggling the priorities is a continuing game, and I don't mean game, I don't mean to use that word lightly. It's just continuing like that, and that's what the government continues to be faced with. I have to take the opportunity to say one more thing, because the member also mentioned that he comes to Cabinet regularly and makes his requests, and he gets no answer from anyone. And the truth of the matter is we have a chain of command, and I admit in this forum that sometimes that chain of command breaks down, and that is something which we need to correct. With regards to prices being too high and all of that, I just want to make sure we understand. He knows how it works, but I'm not so sure the public understands how it works, and I want to make sure, because it's not his job to make the public know that. I know that. But I want to make sure that the public understands that when we set policy, there is a public service which executes that policy. And we're always told where the lines are drawn and where the politicians must not get involved and that kind of stuff. And sometimes the system is such, and God knows, I wish that I could wave a magic wand and change a lot of the way the system is, but that is something that I believe we're going to live with as long as we're around this system. But the system is as such that there are many things over which the political arm of government and the executive arm of government do not have control, and we just do our best to work together and make sure that those who are in control and are in charge do the best that they can to make sure that we get the best results. And it is always a question of working on efficiencies. It never stops. So I don't mean to go on and on, Mr. Chair, but the business of priorities, I'm just asking members not to make it sound like the government doesn't care, because that's not a fact. It's just that with limited resources, there's only so much we can do. So if everybody's mind is set that this now becomes a priority, then sacrifices are going to have to be made to make this a priority, and it means that something that there was an intention to do will not get done because the funds won't be there. I just want to make sure we understand that. But for me personally, from the very beginning, I agreed that that was a priority, because the member from East End is perfectly right. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to our children, that should be the number one priority. But it's not quite that easy when you get the screaming and hollering all over for the various demands from your citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. Minister Rivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, well, I just want to say thank you to the members in the House. Thank you for hearing and heeding my cry, as was mentioned, with respect to our children. I mean, obviously, I am the minister with responsibility for education, and therefore I advocate for all of our children in the country, throughout the three islands. Of course, I am a representative for the District of West Bay, and I'm honored to do so. But when I'm in my role as minister, I advocate for the needs of all of our children in all of the districts. And of course, as has been indicated, it isn't for lack of desire, but for lack of resources. And I'm appreciative of the fact that the government has continued to show the flexibility and the ability to recognize that when there are needs, we're looking as best as possible to address them. But as Minister Tibbetts said, it may mean other priorities in other areas are affected, and as long as we are aware of that, that's fine. But certainly from my perspective, and that's why I asked to be in this particular role when the offer came to me to be a member of Cabinet, to take on the responsibility of education, because I believe, not just in theory, but I know through personal experience, education and investing in our children, I do not see what we spend on education as an expense in any way. It is an investment in our future. It is for us to make sure that we get the maximum returns on that investment, but it is an investment, and we should never feel constrained to wanting to invest in our children in that regard. So obviously, I'm grateful, and I just want to say thank you to the members of the House, and also thank you again to my staff in helping me to get to this point with respect to doing and delivering on the promises that we've made thus far.
Thank you, Minister Rivers. Sorry, Mr. McLean.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to. Oh, no, non-committee. You can speak as much as you want in committee on motion. No, there's a don't. No, let's get that. Right, McKeever? You can speak as much as you want as long as the vote is not taken. As long.
That's why I was telling the chairman the other day when you didn't want me to speak.
You know that ain't true.
Oh, that's true.
Mr. McLean.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you see, when we speak of priorities, and we know that the government is seeking to utilize funds that requires this finance committee to approve. And we wonder why we are left out when there are things that we will reallocate funds for, and then it is what we require in our constituency is a pittance of the reallocation of funds by the government. You know, I have concerns about the reallocation of these funds from reserves and the like, but certainly, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate some of why we're doing it, and I will support those things because it's in the global sense that we're trying to address some of those matters, sir. And you know, you have been in our environment, you understand how that works, sir. And we must, in the interest of our responsibility globally, nationally that is, but we can do it there and do it for other things as well. And our little pittance in the eastern and north side is not being addressed. It's sad, Mr. Chairman, sad that we have to come here and make it publicly known
All right,
for
thanks.
the government to respond.
Thanks, Mr.
Sad.
McLean. Thank you. Mr. Miller, the government has given a commitment. Sorry? Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to accept the commitment of the government to try to find the money to do this project. I would just ask that, and I'm quite willing to withdraw the motion based on the commitment of the Deputy Premier. However, there's a certain urgency in getting started because, and let me explain to members, because members would not have the benefit of me of seeing the plans. Plans are drawn, plans are approved by planning, they're now before Building Control Unit, the plans are accepted by the PTA, plan is accepted by the teachers and by the Education Department. We went through a very long process, and unfortunately, not being an architect or engineer, but I had to insist on some value engineering in the design to remove certain things which were just going to be costly, like bathrooms in each classrooms and stuff like that. And storage rooms 23 feet by 6 foot wide when they don't have nothing to store because I have to supplement the resources of the school every semester. But we need to start as early in July as possible because in an effort to save money, it is not a standalone building. It is an extension to the existing school building. And it would be very disruptive if the major construction, such as putting up the walls and the roof, is going on when school is in session. In fact, I would hazard that the risk to the children would make it almost impossible. But I am confident that if the government is serious and follows through on their commitment, once we get started by the middle of July, in 6 weeks, we should be able to put up the walls because there's just 4 straight walls and 2 dividing walls, and the roof, which would mean the major construction would be finished and only interior work, which would not be disrupted to the children because there are doors that open onto the playing field, which the construction crew could use. So I would just ask the government, and I'm quite willing to accept the ministers of planning and agriculture's request. I'm quite willing to give up all other capital projects in the Northside constituency for the financial year 2015, 2016, including the planned road works, if necessary, to get these 2 classrooms for the children. I'm quite willing to agree to that, and I will take on the responsibility of explaining that to my constituents, because I'm sure that the good people of Northside would support the 2 classrooms and the staff room without getting any other projects or road work for that financial year. So I withdraw the motion and I accept the Deputy Premier's commitment, but I would just ask that we act as expeditiously as possible to go through the tendering process and get it out so we can have the major construction finished by September, so we'll have the classrooms there. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Minister Kirkconnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for those words he's just offered. I want to say that one of the reasons the government looked at this from the standpoint that it was better to have the government involved in the building is exactly what you've just explained, that if the PTA goes about it themselves and trying to contract somebody who is not Public Works, who is not only going to have the responsibility to build it,
but to supervise the building, but the responsibility to maintain it afterwards, the continuity of the project itself is better suited to government at this point, and that's the commitment. I also want to say that in conversation sidebar just with the Minister of Planning, that he commits that he will be actively working with you on this project to try to expedite it as quickly as possible during the months that the children aren't there.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add, in support of the Deputy Premier, I just been presented with an Auditor General's report, major capital projects building schools, where we spent 13.4 million in primary schools, but it wasn't in the outside of East End, and there was an average of a 34% overrun. This project is very simple, right? And this project should be managed, and I will give the ministers the commitment that I will visit the site on a regular basis, because we've just had a huge overrun on a simple bus shelter just due to, anyway, but not get into that. But this is a very simple project. I believe it can be brought in at a reasonable amount of money. We just need to manage it properly.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And I want to thank all members for their contributions to that. I think we've just witnessed democracy in action. So it's to the benefit of the country that we are able to resolve these matters in the way that we do so. We've completed the appropriations to the Minister for Education, Employment and Gender Affairs. And before we proceed to examine the appropriations to the Attorney General, I think Minister Panton, you wanted to move a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am quite prepared to wait.
Until we've completed the
Yes,
appropriations of the other ministries? Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Thank you,
So we will take a few minutes to enable the Attorney General and his team to enter the chamber.
What page, Mark? 254. You got it. You got it.
Thank you all very much for being here this morning. We will now consider the appropriations to the Attorney General, beginning with the output groups, followed by executive expenses. So the first output group being LGA 1, provision of legal advice and representation for $1,936,837, found on page 254. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, I think that we should dispense with these allocations as quickly as possible. And I propose to do so by voting in block for all of them. I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. All those in favor of doing as Mr. Bush has suggested, that we accept them all in block, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Thank you very much. Mr. Bulgin, we've accepted all of your appropriations in block, sir, and I think you probably spent more time waiting for us than you spent in the chamber.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to express my thanks to all honorable members for their continued support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. Bulgin. Mis- We will now consider the appropriations to the Cabinet on behalf of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And I will proceed to take those in blocks. So all those in favor, well, actually it's only one. So all those in favor of DPA 1, prosecution and international cooperation for $3,031,059. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
All right, I see how good we treat Ghana.
Thank you.
You send some of them
Thank
back
you, Mr. Richards.
4,000 miles away. We don't need them all down here. That's the only caveat to that.
It was suggested that they be taken in block.
Motion moved and accepted.
Precisely. Mr. Bush. For the record, I'll just read all of the appropriations to the Director of Public or to Cabinet on behalf of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Just for the record, to ensure that the record reflects all of the outputs, we'll do it in this particular manner. So therefore, all those in favor of LGA 1, these are the appropriations to the Attorney General. All those in favor of LGA 1, provision of legal advice and representation for $1,936,837. LGA 3, law teaching and publications, $1,306,372. LGA 4, drafting of legislation, $971,068. LGA 5, policy advice to the Attorney General for $1,040,926. LGA 6, financial intelligence services, $772,112. LGA 7, review and modernization of laws, $389,127. OE 6, contribution to Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, $85,000. And OE 26, personal emoluments to the Attorney General for $186,822. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
The record should now reflect that. Appropriations to Cabinet on behalf of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. All those in favor of DPA 1, prosecution and international cooperation, $3,031,059. Thank you. We will now consider the appropriations to the Chief Justice. Turning now to output group JAD 1. Admin. You can do them. Yeah. So all those in favor of JAD1, administrative support to the judiciary, $1,324,094. JAD2, support of court proceedings, $3,788,096. JAD3, collection of revenue, $569,525. JAD4, financial management of court funds, $264,279. HEA 8, autopsy and coroner services, $240,000. NGS 2, legal aid services, $2,700,000. OE1, personal emoluments for the judiciary, $1,895,614. OE4, judiciary expenses, $1,031,000. OE43, depreciation of judicial executive assets, $118,571. OE65, Court of Appeal expenses, $570,000. And EA 145, new courthouse, $200,000. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. That completes the appropriations with respect to the Attorney General. Thank you very much, Mr. Bulger.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all honorable members. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. We will now consider the appropriations to the Oversight Committee of the Legislative Assembly, in particular ICO 1, Compliance with Freedom of Information Legislation, $796,983. Are there any questions? Mr. Bush? Oh, page 274.
Mr. Chairman, I move a motion that it be approved in block. Can you put the question, please?
No, you know, after the question be put, you ask for the motion to be moved, and therefore I will debate the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I move that the question be put.
And I still have a right to debate that, Mr. Chairman, and I do have a question.
Thank you, Mr.
Right.
Gentlemen, if I may, if
Mr. Chairman, how
Gentlemen,
many can the member say, I don't know the gentleman's name, but how many audits per year is carried out?
before you answer the question, if you would give your full name and title for the record.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Corey Martinson. I'm the Acting Information Commissioner while Mr. Jan Liebars is away visiting his sick mother. So I'm here to represent. Audits, we don't actually perform any official audits, as that would be under the Auditor General, but we do investigations.
How many audits are carried out per year by the audit?
No, Mr. Bush, this is the Freedom of Information. Sorry.
Page 2 what?
274
Oh, sorry. Okay.
ICO1.
All right, sorry. No, you don't want to answer that. I agree with putting the motion in block.
Okay. It's only this particular one, so we'll just proceed to vote on this. So all those in favor of ICO1, compliance with Freedom of Information legislation, $796,983 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And those against, no. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews. We will now consider appropriations to the Complaints Commissioner, appropriations to the Oversight Committee of Legislative Assembly, and in particular, the Complaints Commissioner. Thank you. Appropriation TCC 1, Public Interest Investigations, $676,466 found on page 270 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions? Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, the question that I would have to ask since the
Mr. Miller, you have a question, sir? Okay. Yes, sir.
I just want to probably acknowledge and congratulate Bridget and all the work that the Office of the Complaints Commissioner is doing, and encourage her to continue to carry the flag and hold your head high. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no questions on outputs TCC1 and TCC2, then we'll proceed to vote if there are no questions. So therefore, all those in favor of TCC1, Public Interest Investigation, so $676,466, and TCC2, Policy Advice and Public Education Outreach for $106,945 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Thank you.
Yeah, he could ask me. I have 1,000, but the truth is I can get them answered otherwise, and I think should move for the vote at this point.
Captain Eugene, any questions on the Auditor General? No? Okay. All right, so we'll proceed to vote on the Auditor General's appropriations. So all those in favor of ADO 1, Services to the Legislative Assembly and its committee, $664,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, that completes our examination of the various appropriations to the ministers and portfolios. So I think this is perhaps an opportune time to take our luncheon break, and we'll return here at 1:30 p.m.